Do not be afraid of poverty. Let money flow freely. I will let it flow in, but you must let it flow out. I never send money to stagnate, only to those who pass it on. Keep nothing for yourself. Hoard nothing. Only have what you need and use. This is my law of discipleship. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. I just watched a video. This one on YouTube. By a man who unfortunately passed away last year. Richard Garnett gave this incredible speech where he talked about eternal treasures. He talked about his job and what he did was able to fund, missionaries and different ministries across the world. Different things that he invested in was an 18-year-old girl who went to Romania in her gap year and started an orphanage. Christian couples in the African bush built homes with 3 rooms. 1 room for 7 beds for orphan girls, 7 beds for orphan boys, and the 3rd room was for them. He funded families, 150 families, 80 children, 80 parents fund their holidays in Uganda national parks for the same amount it would cost a 2-week trip for a normal family in Europe. What Richard profoundly realized was that the more he invested into God's kingdom, the more he received an abundant amount of joy. Jesus said, wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This is Matthew 6:21. If we invest God's coins or the wealth he gives us for regional, national, or even international causes, it becomes eternal treasure. Like the analogy, or not analogy, but the hope that Richard is proclaiming here is, in heaven, he'll be able to sit down with all of the friends that he's made in his support and in his giving. And he can sit down with them in heaven and ask them and talk with them and hear their stories. He said he just can't wait to get to heaven because of that. And then he gave this devotional that I read. And many people fear this kind of giving because they fear poverty. But the devotional calls that out. Don't be afraid of poverty. One promise you can't bank on is you can't outgive God. You cannot outgive God. God meets your needs in every conceivable way. The last example he gives is George Miller, who is a British Christian evangelicist, and he looked after orphans in the UK and orphanages. He never asked for money. He only asked from God. He never asked anyone other than God for money. And God gave him £210 million. The profound thing he did was he donated 1/3 of this, 70 million, out to international ministries. That support went to the Chinese church and has contributed to the growth of 120 million Chinese Christians. So his legacy wasn't what he just did in the UK, it was for the growth of 100 million people. So this was his challenge, and it's what profoundly challenged me is, can you not only serve the local churches in your community, but can you serve the global church? One last thing that I want to talk about one last thing. I think this video really moved me and moved my heart. And one thing that I thought was, what if God isn't abundantly blessing and allowing money to flow into my life right now? Because I'm not willing to give it away. What if God only gives abundantly and very generously when you don't even keep all of it? My immediate response or reaction to, let's say I had $100 million tomorrow, where would I spend it? I'd probably save more than 50% in just a safe, high interest bank where I don't have to work again. I keep most of the money to myself. I probably buy a few nice things like a house and nicer computer or maybe a car. I would still have 30 million to, need to put somewhere. Probably one of the last things on my mind would be to give it away. Giving it away. Like that makes me jerk my head back a little bit and raise my eyebrows. I'm like, I just got all this money, why should I give it away? But the key part of that story is God was the one who gave you all that money. So it's actually his. It's not yours to keep. The $100 million, God's coins, or the wealth that you accumulate, it's not yours. It's God's. And so what if you were a good steward of God's money and you actually invested it into building his kingdom, donating? It was crazy, the examples Richard was making in this video, how little it would actually cost to fundamentally change so many lives out in the world outside of the West. Like, for only 12,000 pounds a year, he said, I don't know how much that is in dollars, like around let's say $1,000 a month, like you could support 15 full-time devout priests in India to go build churches and to go build Christian communities. 15. It's like $1 million could go into 20 million. It could reach 20 million people by translating the Bible into like different parts of the world that don't have actual Bible translations. I'm just thinking, like, I feel when I watched this video, I felt so, my mind was limited to just the ways of the Western world and how most people in the West have this, I feel like, narrowed perspective, this limited mind of thinking of provide for yourself, just make sure you and your family are taken care of, make sure you go down your career path and you chase success. When there's Christian brothers and sisters out in Africa, just their full-time way of giving is orphanage and building homes for orphans. Like, I still don't quite understand, but just being exposed to that possibility and just like that's the actual reality out there, it makes me rethink the way that I'm living my life right now. And potentially the whole trajectory of how I utilize my money. Going back to the analogy of if I had $100 million tomorrow, what would I do with it? If God gave me $100 million, what percentage would I just keep to myself? I don't need that much to, I guess, fully retire. I would probably just want my family, my future family, like even 10 million would support that. That's way more than enough, I think, to retire everyone. Like, what could you do with $90 million after that? So yeah, makes you think how how limited is your line of thinking right now? Have you really thought of what's possible? Of the impact that you can make on the world? The lives that are at stake? The lives that are being called to be touched by your efforts? Crazy. February 14th, 2025. Elijah came out.